I was supposed to get engaged in a $1 million gown beside the man I loved. But he left me for his ex the morning of our ceremony. So I walked onto that stage alone, tore up the script and proposed to his black sheep cousin instead. They thought I'd be humiliated. Instead I became the storm. The morning of the engagement was overcast. I woke up with a tightness in my chest that even 3 espressos couldn't ease. My suite in the Westview Grand Hotel was filled with stylists, assistants, makeup artists and garment bags the size of refrigerators. Everything was timed to the minute. Ceremony at 3, champagne toast at 4, dinner at 6. I was halfway through my makeup when my phone buzzed. It wasn't Aiden. It was his assistant. "Miss Wynne," he said, voice oddly hushed. "There's been an emergency." My stomach clenched. "What kind of emergency?" "Camille. She attempted suicide this morning. She's at Eastside General." The brush in the artist's hand froze. The room turned pin-drop quiet. The assistant continued. "Mr. Hale has gone to see her." I stood up slowly, makeup half finished, robe still tied loosely at the waist. "He asked me to let you know." 10 minutes later, the door to the suite flew open. Aiden stood there in his tuxedo, breathing hard, tie hanging undone around his neck. His eyes were bloodshot, his expression rattled. "I'm going," he said. My breath caught. "You're what?" "I have to see her," he said, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "She could have died, Lena." Guests were already beginning to arrive. His black dress shoes squeaked against the marble as he crossed the room. He was halfway to the door when I stepped into his path. "What is wrong with you?" I said quietly. He stopped, blinking like he didn't understand. "Today is our engagement day," I said. "Not just any other day. I could have forgiven you yesterday. I could have looked away tomorrow. But today? Of all days." He sighed and looked away like I was the one being irrational. "She's not okay," he muttered. "This isn't about us. She's not your responsibility. She needs me." I stared at him. His expression twisted. "An engagement can happen anytime. What else do you want? You really believe I begged you for this engagement?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Aiden didn't respond. He didn't even look me in the eye. Instead he pushed past me and walked out. His assistant gave me an apologetic bow before hurrying after him, suit jacket flapping like a shadow. The door slammed shut behind them. I didn't move. Not for a long time. The stylist eventually stepped forward, eyes full of hesitation. "Miss Wynne, should we still help you change into the gown?" The custom wedding dress hung in the corner like a ghost of a life that had already fallen apart. It was hand-sewn over a year by French ateliers. The embroidery alone took 3 months. The bodice was embroidered with silver thread in my family's crest. I stared at it. I stared back. 1 year. $1 million. 1 betrayal. "Change me," I said. No one said a word. They simply moved. As they zipped up the dress, my mind was a blank canvas. I didn't cry. Not even when the makeup artist hesitated near my eye. Not even when she asked softly, "Do you want us to redo it?" "No." "Are you sure?" I nodded once. My emotions weren't gone. They were just locked in a chest inside my ribcage waiting for the right key. Let them whisper outside. Let them say he left me. Let them talk about the poor rich girl in her $1 million dress with no fiancé to stand beside her. Let them. Because they had no idea what I would do next. It had been nearly an hour since the engagement was supposed to begin. The band had looped the same instrumental track 3 times. Champagne flutes clinked awkwardly. My grandfather's expression had gone from neutral to thunderous. My grandfather stood near the front, surrounded by a cluster of concerned family friends and board members from both families. The crowd had begun to turn. I just stood there, perfectly still in my gown, my spine straight, my eyes fixed on nothing. Then I took a breath, stepped forward and walked onto the stage. The crowd stilled instantly. Some actually gasped. Maybe it was the gown, ivory silk cascading like liquid light, the veil draped down my back like a promise that would never be kept. Maybe it was the way I held my chin, not a trace of apology in my posture. Or maybe it was because I walked out alone. No groom. No best man. No engagement. Only me. I took the mic from the stand and looked directly into the sea of stunned faces. Thank you all for taking time out of your lives to attend what was meant to be the engagement ceremony between myself, Lena Wynne, and Aiden Hale, I said. My voice didn't waver. Didn't need to. Aiden and I have known each other since childhood. Our families have been close for generations. We were expected to marry, to seal a partnership built on trust, friendship, and mutual respect. I paused. Unfortunately, it seems one of us is still tangled in the past. A ripple went through the audience. People sat straighter. Phones were discreetly raised to record. Earlier today, I continued, Aiden received word that his former girlfriend, Camille Hart, had experienced a personal crisis. And rather than stand beside me today, he left. Not a sound in the room. Only a collective intake of breath. I glanced around, locking eyes with those who had once doubted me, those who pitied me, and those who had always watched from the sidelines hoping for a train wreck. Well, I'm not here to be pitied. I straightened, my grip on the mic easy, composed. So let me make things very clear. Since he's not here to say it himself, I'll say it for both of us. I met the gaze of Aiden's grandfather, who looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. I hereby declare our engagement void. It was like dropping a match into gasoline. Gasps. Whispers. Audible shock rippling from the first row to the back wall. Aiden Hale left her? Are you kidding me? She's the one who saved their company. She canceled it on stage, did you hear that? Someone near the front muttered, Aiden Hale really is insane. Camille Hart. Again. I watched it all happen, every little tremor in their confidence. They'd come expecting a lavish engagement. What they got was a public severing. Across the room, my grandfather stood with his arms crossed, pride etched in every line of his face. Aiden's family had nothing to say. His mother, flustered and pale, looked around as if searching for someone to save the moment. His father pinched the bridge of his nose, refusing to look up. But it was his grandfather who exploded. So this is the grandson you raised? My grandfather said, pointing a finger across the room. Is this how you treat the girl whose family rescued your sinking ship? Mr. Hale's face turned beet red. We didn't know, he didn't tell us he was leaving. Oh, but you knew about Camille, didn't you? My grandfather shot back. You've let her linger like a shadow for years. The old man slammed his cane to the ground. Go find him. And when you do, tell him not to come back. In the crowd, someone laughed quietly. It wasn't the bitter laugh of a guest caught in awkward drama. It was the amused, lazy chuckle of someone who was entertained. I turned and found him, Miles Hale, lounging back in his chair like he'd paid for front row tickets. One leg crossed over the other, swirling a glass of red wine in his hand. He didn't flinch when I looked at him. He just tilted his head and gave me that same smirk he always wore whenever I fell flat on my face. When Aiden forgot our anniversary, when Camille crashed my business launch party, when I was forced to stand alone and smile through it all. I had always thought of him as a spectator. But maybe, just maybe, that's when it hit me. The venue was still booked. The guests were still seated. The champagne still chilled. The cameras still recording. Why waste the moment? The ballroom was still holding its breath when I turned to face Miles Hale. He leaned back in his chair with the air of someone watching a play he knew the ending to. The red wine in his glass tilted lazily, catching the light, untouched. He wasn't supposed to be a main character in my story. He was the cousin. The rebel. The one who drove vintage cars too fast and had a different date every gala. The one who smiled every time I was humiliated, as if my pain was some sort of inside joke between us. But today I needed a stage partner. So I spoke into the mic, eyes still on him. I need a groom, I said calmly. Right now. Gasps exploded across the room. Miles Hale, I said, lifting my chin, do you have the guts to come up here? He blinked once. Then slowly a smile curved his mouth, half wicked, half delighted. The kind of smile that said, you're playing my game now. He stood, smooth as silk. People parted instinctively as he walked, his tailored suit catching just the right amount of spotlight. His steps were unhurried, confident. The kind of confidence that comes from having absolutely nothing to lose. He reached the stage steps, looked up at me, and offered his hand with exaggerated politeness. Miss Wynne, he said, voice laced with lazy amusement. It would be my honor. He stepped onto the stage and turned to face the guests. Every eye in the room was locked on us. Some with disbelief. Some with horror. Miles took the velvet ring box from my hand. No hesitation. No questions. He opened it, took out the ring, and slid it onto my finger, gracefully, deliberately, like he'd rehearsed it 100 times. His fingers brushed mine. Cold to warm. Then before I could brace for it, he stepped closer. Close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. And he kissed me. It wasn't a soft kiss. It wasn't the kind you give a friend in public for show. It was the kind that made time stop. That made gasps erupt through the crowd. That made the orchestra freeze mid-note. It was claiming. It was deliberate. It was a declaration that said, she's mine now. Watch closely. The lights above us turned golden. The cameras flashed. Champagne corks burst in celebration. And just as I caught my breath, he leaned in again and whispered in my ear, "You really should have picked me years ago." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I tilted my head and murmured, "Better late than never." The fallout was instant. Aiden's parents were nearly hysterical. I could hear his mother whispering to anyone who'd listen, "She's doing this to humiliate us. It's a stunt. She can't possibly marry him." His father was on his phone, pacing in the shadows near the back. Probably calling Aiden. Probably begging him to come fix what couldn't be unbroken. Mr. Hale, the patriarch, stood frozen at the head table. The same man who once dismissed Miles as a disappointment now had to watch his second grandson slide the family heirloom onto my finger. I turned away from all of them. Because this wasn't about Aiden anymore. This was about me. And what I would build next. Backstage, after the explosion of cameras and attention, I grabbed Miles by the elbow and yanked him into one of the smaller conference rooms behind the ballroom. He followed with no protest. When the door clicked shut, I turned to face him, arms crossed. "Let me be clear," I said. "This wasn't a joke." "Did I look like I was joking?" he replied smoothly. I ignored that. "If you want to ride this wave with me, fine. But it's not just for attention." "Oh." He raised a brow. "I assumed you were about to suggest a honeymoon in the Alps." I narrowed my eyes. "I'm serious, Miles. I'm not playing house. I want something real. And I think you do too." That made him pause. I pulled a slim folder from my clutch and handed it to him. Inside were the details of my proposed health and wellness collaboration. A joint project between my family's pharmaceutical company and a lifestyle beverage brand I'd spent the last year quietly developing. He skimmed it. His smirk disappeared. "This is actually good." "Of course it is," I said flatly. "The board wouldn't let you run with it?" They laughed in my face. He nodded slowly. "So you want to use this sudden engagement to force their hand?" "No," I said. "I want you to help me turn this into something they can't ignore." Miles sat down in one of the chairs, flipping through the proposal again. "You realize," he said after a moment, "if I do this, I'll be stepping out of the shadows. Taking sides. Going up against Aiden." I gave a small shrug. "You were always smarter than him. You just never wanted to prove it." He didn't deny it. Instead, he looked up and said, "And what do I get in return?" "Control," I said bluntly. "If we succeed, if we build this thing into something real, I'll support you. Publicly. At the board level. For the future of Foster Enterprises." His eyes darkened. "And what about you?" he asked quietly. "What do you want, Lena?" I exhaled. The truth tasted bitter and clean. I want power. Not for its own sake. But because I'm done waiting for people to take me seriously. I've spent too many years being the girl people whisper about at parties. I want them to whisper for different reasons now. He stood again. Moved toward me. I didn't flinch. He didn't smirk. He just studied me like he was seeing me for the first time. Then he said softly, "You really mean it?" "I do." A beat of silence. Then his lips curled. "Well, hell. I've always liked a girl who knows what she wants." He extended his hand, mockingly formal. "Miss Wynne," he said, "shall we ruin some legacies together?" I took his hand. And didn't let go. Later that night, while the last of the guests filed out and the catering staff cleared half-eaten hors d'oeuvres from white linen tables, Miles and I sat in the empty ballroom. No photographers. No speeches. Just the two of us. "Do you think your grandfather will disown you?" I asked. "Unlikely," Miles replied, swirling a glass of scotch. "He's too busy trying to figure out how I pulled this off." I leaned back against the chair, wedding gown crinkling beneath me. "He always underestimated you." "They all did," he said. Then he looked at me. So did you? I met his gaze. Not anymore. He grinned. Flattered. Then his eyes dropped to my bare finger, the one where the ring still sat. You're keeping it? For now, I said. Let it remind them. Of what? That you don't get to walk out on me and expect me to wait. Miles raised his glass. To reminders. I raised mine. To revenge. 3 days later, the man I once planned to marry finally remembered I existed. I was curled up on the penthouse balcony of the Windcrest Hotel, half wrapped in a silk robe, sipping a fresh fruit smoothie while emails from vendors and scandal-hungry journalists flooded my inbox. My phone rang. The screen flashed, Aiden Hale. I answered with the same indifference I reserved for spam calls. Lena, he said. His voice was unusually soft. Too soft. When are you coming home? I blinked. Home. He hesitated. Our home. I laughed. I didn't mean to, but the sound escaped anyway. Pure, unfiltered disbelief. Our home. You mean the apartment I bought, renovated, and decorated? The one you didn't contribute a single cent toward? That home. Stop it, Lena. Camille has depression. You dragging her like this is insulting? I snapped. She's been faking breakdowns since college and you fall for it every single time. Meanwhile, I was the idiot painting your walls and planning our engagement playlist. You don't understand her. I don't want to, I cut him off. And frankly, neither should you. Aiden's tone sharpened. This is between us. Why drag him into it? Him. He didn't say Miles by name, but I could practically hear the venom dripping. You should stay away from him. Funny, I replied. You didn't seem this concerned when you left me on our engagement day. You better take the step down while you still can, Lena, he warned. Don't come crying when there's no way down left. It was so audacious I almost choked on my smoothie. Before I could respond, the phone was snatched from my hand. Miles raised it to his ear. Hey bro, he said lazily. She doesn't need a step down. You can enjoy your tragic romance with Camille. I'll take good care of Lena. There was a pause. Then even from where I sat, I could hear Aiden's rage erupting. Miles winced, then calmly moved the phone away from his ear and hung up mid-tirade. Brother, he said, turning to me with a mock grimace, has no chill. I rolled my eyes. He thinks I'm doing this to get back at him. Miles tilted his head, looking at me thoughtfully. Aren't you? I admitted. No. I'm doing it for me. He grinned. Even better. And just like that, he draped an arm around my shoulders and said, pack a bag. We're going somewhere warm. We left that night. No press. No announcement. Just the two of us in a private jet. When the city lights faded beneath the clouds, I realized I hadn't felt this light in years. The flight attendants brought champagne. I drank one flute and fell asleep. When I woke up, we were somewhere over the Pacific and Miles was reading my business proposal again, annotating it with an expensive pen like it was a script he was about to perform. You're up, he murmured, not looking up. I thought you didn't care about business. I don't, he said, but if we're doing this, we're doing it right. I stared at him for a long moment. Who are you? He shrugged. Your husband. Sort of. Fake husband, I corrected. Still counts on the internet. I didn't reply, but I did smile. Over the next 2 weeks, I stopped checking the news. I stopped answering calls. I stopped thinking about what Aiden was doing or what Camille was faking, or which family friend was whispering about me at which country club. I just breathed. Miles took me everywhere. We went skydiving in Queensland, surfing in Costa Rica, and sailing in Santorini. He booked out rooftop restaurants with no names and took me to hidden art galleries in the French Riviera. And through it all, he was reckless and protective and maddening. He teased me constantly, calling me Mrs. Hale, in front of startled strangers. He bought me flaming cocktails and carried my heels when my feet hurt. He kissed me once on a dare at the edge of a mountain trail, then kissed me again when I didn't pull away. He never asked questions. But he watched. And listened. And remembered things I hadn't even realized I said. One morning we paraglided off the edge of a cliff. The wind roared past my ears. My heart thundered like a war drum. But as the ocean stretched wide below me and the sun burned gold above, I laughed. Real laugh. The kind I hadn't let myself have in years. After we landed, he unclipped my harness and brushed the hair out of my face. You didn't scream, he said, feigning surprise. I was too busy flying. Most people panic the first time. Most people don't walk out on their own engagement and fake marry their ex's cousin either. He smiled, slow and wicked. You're not most people. Neither are you, I said softly. He met my gaze, eyes unreadable. Then he said something I didn't expect. Good. I only fall for dangerous women. That night we sat by the shore with a fire crackling between us. I was barefoot. He was wearing one of those linen shirts that made him look annoyingly good even when windblown. I think I forgot who I was, I murmured, staring out at the waves. Then it's a good thing I didn't, he replied. I looked over. He wasn't smiling. He was just watching me, calm and steady. I leaned in, kissed his cheek and whispered, "Thank you." He didn't say anything at first. But a moment later his hand slid over mine. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "But if you want to keep going, revenge, business, whatever, I'm in. All in." He raised our joined hands and kissed the back of mine. "Whatever it takes." We landed back in the city to flashing cameras and speculation. Miles and I walked through the arrivals gate hand in hand, not for show this time, not exactly. We were too sun-kissed and sea-salted to care what anyone thought. The headlines had already spun out of control. Heir ditched at altar. Engaged a cousin instead? Wynn Corporation heiress turns engagement into corporate power play. The Hale family's black sheep rises to power. Miles read them aloud in the car, voice full of dramatic flair. You know, I never thought I'd trend for anything other than crashing a Ducati into a valet stand. You're welcome, I muttered. He smirked. You, my dear, are the best bad decision I've ever made. I rolled my eyes. It's not a decision yet. He raised an eyebrow. Oh, so what was all that kissing and skydiving? A soft launch. I needed you, I admitted. But not for that. He grew quiet. For once. What did you need me for then? I looked out the window as skyscrapers blurred past. To prove I could build something better. Without Aiden. Without anyone holding me back. Back at headquarters the mood had shifted. Board members who used to look at me like a decorative vase now stood when I entered. Assistants stammered over my title. Investors started asking for my opinion instead of my grandfather's. They didn't say Little Miss Wynn anymore. They said President Wynn. It wasn't just because I came back with a new ring and a new partner. It was the product. The collaboration between my wellness line and Miles's beverage venture had taken off like wildfire. The packaging was minimalist. The branding sharp. We didn't pitch it as medicine. We sold it as a luxury lifestyle. A way to feel rich from the inside out. We hired influencers, ran sleek ads, built scarcity. We launched with 5 products. Herbal teas, vitamin shots, adaptogen tonics. And within the first month, $1 billion in revenue. Miles didn't gloat. Well, he did. But not the way I expected. Instead of bragging, he got up at 5 a.m. to review logistics. Instead of throwing parties, he sat through 3-hour marketing meetings without falling asleep. Instead of flirting his way through launch day, he stood beside me in a tailored navy suit, making sharp, concise remarks that silenced even the most arrogant execs in the room. I watched it all unfold like I was seeing him for the first time. He had vision. And command. He spotted flaws before I did. Suggested pivots in branding that made us even more appealing to Gen Z. Created a new cross-distribution plan I never would have thought of. At one point I caught myself staring at him across the boardroom table. He looked up. Caught me. His mouth curved. Told you, he said, I wasn't just a pretty face. Later that night, after our product hit #1 on every social commerce platform and our competitors were scrambling to copy us, we stood on the rooftop of my office building. The wind tugged at the hem of my coat. Miles handed me a glass of sparkling wine. I took it dazed. I underestimated you, I admitted. I know, he said, clinking his glass with mine. You were supposed to. Why didn't you ever show this side before? He looked out over the skyline. Because no one ever gave me a reason to. Not even your grandfather? He laughed softly. Especially not him. The celebration banquet was hosted at the most exclusive hotel in the city. Our entire team was there. My grandfather. Miles's. Well, his family didn't come. But it didn't matter. Because he didn't need their approval anymore. He stood beside me as flashbulbs went off. flanked by reporters and executives praising our bold execution and seamless brand strategy. "You're a hell of a team," one of the directors said. I smiled. "We plan to keep it that way." Miles raised his glass and murmured under his breath, "Better than fake engagement rings, don't you think?" I smirked. "Debatable. I like shiny things." His voice dropped. "I can buy you one that actually fits." My breath caught. Before I could respond, he looked away casually, like he hadn't just dropped a subtle grenade in the middle of the conversation. After the banquet, I caught a moment to myself in the hallway. Leaning against the wall, still holding a flute of champagne, I let the hum of celebration fade behind me. I'd done it. I'd walked away from a man who thought I needed him to succeed. And I hadn't just survived, I'd thrived. The girl in the $1,000,000 dress, abandoned in a dressing room? She was gone. In her place stood someone else entirely. "Nice speech," Miles said, walking over. "Very presidential. Think it'll change their minds?" "Oh, it already has," he replied. "They don't just respect you. They fear you a little." "Good," I said. "They should." He leaned against the opposite wall, studying me in that quiet way of his. "You still think you don't need love?" he asked. I hesitated. Then, "I need someone who doesn't make me small." He nodded. "You'll never have to worry about that with me." Silence stretched between us. I raised my glass. "To a new empire." He touched his to mine. "To the woman building it." Old Mr. Hale's 80th birthday banquet was the kind of event that shut down streets. Valets lined the driveway of the Aurelius Grand Hotel. Every luxury car brand you could imagine shimmered beneath the chandeliers. Inside, the ballroom was a garden of white roses, gold linens, and crystal chandeliers suspended like stars. I'd been to many of these events over the years, always as someone's granddaughter, someone's fiancée. But this time, I was attending as the storm. When Miles and I entered the ballroom, the crowd parted like silk. Whispers rippled as we walked past. Not just because of the engagement fiasco, but because everyone had heard about the $1 billion launch. And they were suddenly unsure of which Hale man now mattered more. This time I wasn't wearing a dress to impress Aiden. I was wearing one to remind him what he'd thrown away. Backless, black, simple and severe. Miles, of course, looked like sin in a suit. He wore black on black with no tie, a devil-may-care look that screamed, "I don't care what you think, and I always win anyway." Just as we reached the far end of the ballroom, the doors behind us burst open again. Camille Hart made her entrance. All eyes turned. She wore a red mermaid-cut gown that clung to her like a second skin, her hair piled high in an elaborate twist, her lips matching the dress. She looked like she wanted to be mistaken for the guest of honor's wife. And clinging to her arm just a half step behind was Aiden Hale. He looked tired. Tired and angry. "Good." Camille beamed when she saw me, her eyes sharp as she leaned closer to Aiden and whispered something that made him clench his jaw. Then she sauntered toward us, the picture of smugness. "Miss Wynne," she cooed, placing a hand delicately on her hip. "You didn't waste much time moving on. I guess your feelings for Aiden weren't that deep after all." I opened my mouth, but Miles beat me to it. He sipped his wine and glanced down at her with the barest interest. "Oh," he said lightly. "Camille Hart is still alive?" That doctor must have been a fraud. Didn't they issue a critical condition report last week?" Snorts echoed nearby. Camille's cheeks flamed. "And what's this?" he continued, flicking his gaze down her dress. "A knockoff again? You'd think Aiden could at least afford a real one." Her smile wavered. "That's enough," Aiden snapped, stepping in front of her. "Don't talk to her like that." Miles raised an eyebrow. "Relax. I'm just being observant." "You owe her an apology," Aiden growled. "She's been through a lot." I let out a soft laugh. "The dead don't deserve respect. And neither do you, Aiden." Aiden's nostrils flared. "If you don't apologize, I'll cancel every deal between Foster and Wynn Corp the moment I become chairman." I turned slowly. "You won't even be able to cancel your own lunch order when I'm done with you." Before he could reply, I lifted my leg and drove my stilettoed foot right into his bad knee. He collapsed with a shout, one leg folding beneath him. Gasps erupted around the room. Camille screamed and instinctively shielded her stomach. Dozens of eyes locked on us. And for the first time in years, I smiled at Aiden Hale without fear. "Consider that a delayed engagement gift," I said sweetly. Mr. Hale stood at the head table watching the chaos unfold. He slammed his cane against the floor. Enough. His voice boomed across the ballroom. Everyone stilled. Aiden Hale, he barked. You disgrace the family name. Aren't you embarrassed enough already? Aiden struggled to his feet, face pale and flushed. Mr. Hale turned toward me and Miles. This family owes Lena more than we can ever repay. Whoever she chooses to be with, that is our family's privilege. Gasps again. Aiden froze. Camille blinked rapidly, horror blooming on her face. My grandfather snorted from the side of the room, folding his arms. Finally something we agree on, he muttered. The rest of the night played out like a slow, public funeral for Aiden's dignity. Mr. Hale didn't allow him or Camille near the head table. He refused to acknowledge them during the toast. And when it came time to welcome guests and offer thanks, he turned to Miles and said clearly, You handle the guests. I'm going to rest. He stood, nodded once at me and left, leaving Miles as the face of the family. The message couldn't have been louder if he'd screamed it through a megaphone. The new heir isn't Aiden. It's Miles. As we stood alone for a moment, Miles turned to me. You really kicked him. You really enjoyed it. He grinned. Would you be mad if I said yes? I shook my head. Not at all. Then I looked toward the corner of the ballroom where Aiden stood in silence, his pride bleeding out with every passing second. He still doesn't get it, I said. He thinks this is just another temporary punishment. Miles turned, followed my gaze and said quietly, He'll learn. And standing next to Miles Hale, the man I never meant to choose, I realized something I hadn't admitted before. I didn't miss Aiden. I didn't even hate him anymore. He simply no longer mattered. By morning the battle lines had been drawn. A storm was coming and this time Aiden wouldn't survive it. The whispers started before breakfast. Old Mr. Hale met with Lena Wynn's grandfather in private. Then, Wynn Corp is threatening to pull their investment. And finally, Aiden Hale has been removed from headquarters. It wasn't public. Not yet. But in our world, whispers always came before the blow. The call came through while I was reviewing expansion forecasts in my office. My grandfather didn't waste time. I reminded that old man of the deal we made, he said. Back when Foster Enterprises was sinking, and your marriage was their lifeline. I remembered. My family had poured millions into the Hale operations when they were circling the drain. Everyone else called it a strategic alliance. But we knew better. It was a purchase. You made it clear then, my grandfather continued, that the successor would be your choice. And now it's Miles, I said simply. He's already proven he's twice the leader Aiden ever was. No argument there. That afternoon Miles and I walked back into Foster Enterprises headquarters side by side. The shift in atmosphere was immediate. No one gave Miles the sidelong glances he used to get. No more smirks, no more dismissals. He wasn't the family embarrassment anymore. He was the future. Aiden's nameplate had been taken down from the office door. Miles didn't comment. He simply walked in like it had always belonged to him. I followed him in, watching as he rolled up his sleeves and got to work. No posturing. No speech. He just opened his laptop and began tearing Aiden's legacy apart. It started with the projects Aiden had left half-finished or worse. Over budget, off schedule, or destined to fail. We're cutting this one, Miles said, flipping through reports. These two merge. That one, cancelled. Within 2 hours the department looked different. Half of Aiden's team was reassigned. The other half suddenly remembered how to stay quiet and competent. Miles didn't need to raise his voice. He was a storm behind glass. I sat across from him watching. When the last of the staff filtered out of the room I said, You were always capable of this, weren't you? I just never had the seat. I tilted my head. Or never wanted it? He glanced up, lips quirking. Oh, I wanted it. I just didn't want to beg for it. You let Aiden think he was the one in power. I let everyone think that. I studied him. You were hiding claws. Tigers don't roar in cages. The press caught on fast. Internal shakeup. Aiden Hale quietly removed as successor. Aiden didn't respond. But he didn't disappear either. Until something worse surfaced. I got the call while Miles and I were meeting with legal about expanding into European markets. A journalist was digging into the car crash that had killed Miles's parents, the Hale family's only daughter and her husband. The story wasn't new, but this time it had teeth. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Someone was trying to rattle him. The implication? That Aiden's parents had played a role. That eliminating Miles's mother had made space for their son to inherit everything. But instead of rattling him, it seemed to solidify something in Miles's eyes. He closed the file slowly, leaned back and said nothing for a full minute. Then, finally, that night we met on the balcony of his penthouse. The city glittered beneath us, the wind tugging softly at my coat. I heard, I said, about the crash. The story resurfacing. He didn't look at me at first. Just stared out at the lights. I've always suspected it, he said quietly. And now. He met my eyes. Now I have something I didn't before. Power. He nodded. Evidence, reach, and a team loyal to me. Aiden's father has always underestimated me. It's time he learns why that was a mistake. I moved closer. Just promise me one thing. What? Don't be reckless. He smiled faintly. You're worried about me. Yes. His voice softened. Good. He turned toward me then, close enough that I could see the storm in his eyes. Controlled, focused, dangerous. You don't need to protect me, he said. I know, I whispered. But I care anyway. He smiled again. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe that someone might actually deserve what I was building. Not because he wanted to own it, but because he knew how hard it was to build it in the first place. The gala was breathtaking, walls of cascading white orchids, silver light spilling from crystal chandeliers, and soft strings playing something timeless. It was the kind of place where men wore their egos like cufflinks and women wore war paint in shades of ruby. And tonight I wasn't background noise. I was the storm they whispered about. Miles arrived at my side like a walking scandal. He wore a midnight black suit, no tie, his shirt open at the collar. Powerful, irreverent, untouchable. He made no effort to blend in. Neither did I. My gown was a sculpted sheath of silver silk with a back so low it made enemies. My hair was swept up, my smile faint and razor sharp. Every head turned as we entered. She used to be with Aiden, right? No, he cheated on her. And now she's with his cousin? Miles leaned in. They're very subtle. I grinned. And they think I'm the scandal. You are the scandal, he said, voice low. They just forgot it was your game. The evening moved slowly. We drifted from conversation to conversation, glass to glass. Donors, board members, city officials. Everyone suddenly wanted a word with us. Miles handled it like a diplomat with knives in his back pocket. But somewhere between the speeches and the champagne, I saw the way his fingers brushed against mine. And I remembered. It was 3 years ago. Aiden had humiliated me, again. That night he brought Camille to the gala I'd helped plan for weeks. I watched as he introduced her to donors using my credentials as if I didn't exist. I ran. And behind the hotel's west staircase, I curled into myself with a linen napkin pressed to my face, choking back the sound. That's when I heard footsteps. I expected pity, but I got Miles. He didn't say much. Just sat beside me close enough to feel real. Then he handed me a glass of water. I took a sip. It burned. Is this tequila? I asked, sniffling. Best kind of hydration, he replied. We didn't speak again that night. But he stayed beside me until I could breathe again. Now back in the present, Miles handed me a drink. Careful, he said. This one's just water. I'm learning. I laughed. He stared at me for a moment. You really don't know, do you? Know what? How long I've liked you. I blinked. Back when you were still holding Aiden's hand like it meant something, he said softly. I was watching you try to be loved. You never said anything. You were loyal. And I respected that. Even when it killed me. My voice wavered. I thought loyalty was the same as love. He stepped closer. It's not. I looked up at him, heart lodged in my throat. And now you know the difference, he murmured. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, fingers warm. But before I could speak, before I could tell him anything, his phone buzzed. He glanced down, frown flickering across his face. I need to take this, he said, reluctant. I nodded. Everything okay? Maybe. I'll just step outside for a second. And just like that he was gone into the crowd. I watched him disappear through the terrace doors, his figure swallowed by glass and shadows. I stayed behind, heart still thudding with words unsaid. Then my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I answered anyway. "Ms. Wynne?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. This is Officer Kent from City Metro General. You're listed as the emergency contact for Mr. Miles Hale." The room fell away. "What happened?" "There's been an accident. His vehicle struck a divider on the freeway. He was alone. He's been rushed into emergency surgery." My chest constricted. "Is he?" "He's alive," she said quickly. "But he's unconscious. The doctors are doing everything they can." I was already moving. 10 minutes later I was at the hospital. I couldn't feel my legs. My gown was too tight, my earrings tangled in my hair, my heels echoing down white tile. But none of it mattered. What mattered was the blood on the nurse's scrubs when she met me at the ER desk. "He's in surgery," she said. "Do you want to wait here or?" "I want to see him." "I'm sorry, I must have looked feral because she immediately softened. I'll check with the ER nurse." They let me see him once he was stabilized. He was pale. A bandage wrapped around his forehead, dried blood along his temple. Tubes in his arms. Machines blinking beside the bed. My Miles. Moving. I sat beside him and held his hand. "You don't get to go out like this," I whispered. "Not after what you said. Not before I get the chance to say it back." His hand stayed limp. The machines kept beeping. And I stayed there, for hours. Waiting. The door creaked behind me. I didn't look. Until I heard his voice, low hoarse wry. "Didn't know I meant that much to you." I turned so fast my chair nearly toppled. He stood there in scrubs, bruised and grinning. "Miles." I breathed. "Hey." I ran to him and he caught me strong even in pain. Your car." "Planned," he whispered. "It wasn't real." I pulled back. "What?" "Brake line was tampered with. We suspected it. I let them follow through. Car was empty. Crash was staged." I stared at him. He caught my face in his hands. "I told you," he said. "I'm not walking away from this. Not from you. But I am going to destroy the people who tried to take everything from both of us." We didn't speak until we were in the car. Not when he changed out of hospital scrubs. Not when I followed him out of Metro General, still breathless from the shock of it all. But once the car doors closed and the sound of the city dulled behind tinted glass, I turned. "You staged the crash." Miles didn't look at me. Just stared ahead, eyes sharp. "Yes." "To what end?" "To make them come out of hiding." He explained it in measured pieces like dropping stones down a well. Aiden's father had been laundering money from 3 of their shell projects, masking them under Camille's name. The moment Miles took over Foster, the paper trail started cracking. "But that wasn't enough," he said. "We needed him to panic. So you made him believe you were out of the way." He took the bait. Less than 24 hours after the crash, he wired $50 million into an offshore account under a fake consulting firm. Miles turned to me. "And we had the warrant waiting." I blinked. "Wait. You already had legal clearance." "I've been working with the DA's office for 6 months. 6 months. That meant even before Aiden and Camille humiliated me on the engagement stage. Miles had been hunting them. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you deserved the freedom to make your own choices. I wasn't going to weaponize your pain. You got out before this. That's why it worked." My throat tightened. The arrest happened during a board meeting. Miles brought me with him. The entire Foster executive wing buzzed with tension. No one knew what was about to happen. We sat quietly at the polished mahogany table while Aiden's father, Ronald Hale, shuffled through his talking points. Given the instability of the past few months, he was saying, "I think it's best we discuss transferring more authority back to a centralized." The doors swung open. 2 federal agents stepped in. "Ronald Hale, you're under arrest for embezzlement, tax fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial sabotage. You have the right to remain silent." The room exploded. Gasps, chairs scraping, someone dropping a pen. Ronald turned white. "What the hell is this?" He looked straight at Miles. You did this." Miles didn't even blink. "I told you," he said quietly. "I'm not a child anymore." The press had a field day. Foster family empire fractures. Former patriarch in cuffs. Lena Wynne returns to headlines with shocking reversal of power. And then, as if perfectly scripted, Camille tried to vanish. She booked a red-eye to Switzerland using a fake passport under the name Cara Wallace. A private jet. No luggage. But Miles had already flagged every possible route. She didn't make it past airport security. The video went viral. Hair disheveled, sunglasses crooked, and screaming at a TSA agent. By the time the cameras zoomed in, she was crying hysterically, yelling about how they took everything from me. Later that night, the city was quiet. Too quiet. We were back at Miles's penthouse. Glass walls framing the skyline, low lights, the faint smell of old scotch and leather. I stood near the window, arms crossed, watching the rain trickle down. He came up behind me. "Say it," he said. "What?" "You're angry." I turned. "Did you use me?" His expression shifted. "No. But you let them hurt me. You knew this was coming. You knew they were going to implode and you waited." "I waited for you to walk away," he said. "Not because I wanted you to be hurt, but because you had to choose to leave that world on your own terms. Not because I handed you another one." "And the gala? The accident? The press? All real. Except the crash." I stared at him. "Did you ever think," I said, "that I might have wanted to fight too? That I wasn't a victim waiting to be rescued?" Miles stepped forward. "No," he said. "I never thought you were a victim. I thought you were a storm. I just needed to make sure the sky didn't swallow you before you got to burn." My throat tightened again. He moved closer. "I didn't use you, Lena," he whispered. "I chose you. Over everything. Even my own name." I looked up at him, eyes burning. And for once, just once, I didn't push the feeling away. We didn't rush into anything. After the storm, we sat in the quiet. The empire was ours. Or at least what remained of it. And every day brought more decisions. What to dismantle, what to salvage, what to rebuild with our own hands. Miles never pressed me. He never said, "Now that we've won." Because we hadn't won. Not exactly. We had just survived. And surviving wasn't the same as choosing. It was 2 weeks later, early spring, the rain finally letting up, when I asked him to meet me on the rooftop. He thought we were meeting with investors. He came in a charcoal suit, crisp collar, carrying a binder of documents. He didn't see the candles at first. Or the single table near the edge of the terrace, dressed in white linen and a bottle of wine chilling in the center. He froze. Then turned to me. "What's this?" I stood a few feet away in a tailored cream blazer dress, hair pinned back, heels clicking softly as I crossed to him. "This," I said, "is a proposal." He blinked. "Proposal? For what?" "A joint venture." He raised a brow. "You mean professionally?" "No," I stepped closer. "Not just professionally." The air between us pulsed. He watched me like a man trying not to misread a dream. I smiled, hand steady as I pulled a velvet box from my coat pocket. Inside, a single platinum band, thin and clean. No diamonds. No gimmicks. "Not because I have to," I said. "Not because anyone's watching. But because this time I choose." He didn't speak at first. Then he looked down, laughing softly in disbelief. "Are you saying you want to marry me?" he asked, voice low. I shrugged. "If you're interested in acquiring a partner with 71% voting rights and the capacity to love someone without asking him to shrink, yes." He laughed louder this time. Then he took the box, closed it, and kissed my knuckles. "Make that 71.5%, he murmured, "and I'm in." I kissed him back, fierce, certain, and free. The next gala came just a month later. Same venue. Different story. This time we didn't wait for the whispers. We arrived early. Arm in arm. I wore midnight blue silk, soft as breath, slid up to the thigh. He wore a classic tux, bow tie undone, hair slightly tousled like he didn't need the world to give him permission to shine. People didn't whisper this time. They stared. We passed the entrance where Camille once snuck in under my name. Where Aiden once walked ahead of me like I was a ghost in heels. Now it was me they stopped for. A journalist stepped forward as we moved toward the reception line. Ms. Wynne, can I ask just one?" I turned, not pausing my step. "Only if it's not about the past." She hesitated. "Then what is this story now?" Miles answered before I could. "It's a story about what happens when a woman burns down the world built to cage her." He looked down at me. "And finds someone who'd rather build with her than build over her." I smiled at the reporter. Print that. Later that night as we slow danced near the fountain, I heard someone say, "They're the ones now, huh?" And someone else whispered, "She used to be the girl crying in the corner. Look at her now." Miles heard it too. He leaned down, lips brushing my temple. "You're not the girl they remember." "No," I murmured. "I'm not." He kissed me slowly with the kind of patience that comes from knowing there's no longer anything to prove. Only something to live. It wasn't about revenge anymore. Not really. That ended when Aiden lost everything and Camille's name became a scandal scroll online. This was about the future. The company we rebuilt. The foundation we laid. And the way I finally learned that choosing someone doesn't mean surrendering yourself. It means finding the one who sees what you're made of, and dares to stand beside it. So here we are now. Me and the man I once thought was just a shadow in someone else's story. Turns out, he was the ending I hadn't dared to write. And the beginning I finally gave myself permission to claim. The end.